The Global Briefing on SAfm.
Well, let's get into our global briefing 22 after 6 o'clock. We begin in Moscow today, and that's because the Russian capital has absorbed one of the heaviest aerial assaults it has seen since the war began. A wave of long-range drones and missiles reaching deep into the Russian heartland. Dr. Joan Swart is a researcher in military science at the University of Stellenbosch, joins us this morning. So, Joan, help us understand the significance of these strikes reaching this deep into Russia. What does it all signal?
Yes, good morning, Cathy. So as you said, the significance of this attack and these attacks, they happen sort of every other day or so. It lies not only in the damage caused, which fortunately is very light and kind of insignificant, but it's very much psychological. So it lies in the fact that the war is increasingly reaching deep into Russia itself. And as we discussed previously, there's a growing pressure within parts of Russian society, the Kremlin, military leadership, and diplomatic negotiations for a more decisive response to attacks occurring inside of Russia. So the pressure on President Putin is not simply to respond more forcefully. It's to respond in a way that restores their deterrence without triggering a wider conflict. So this is a far more difficult problem, as you can imagine. And as far as I can see, he has got three options, basically. So option one is to increase pressure within Ukraine, which they have started to do. So it means increasing the cost of continuing the war without widening it necessarily by attacking energy infrastructure, logistics, military industrial facilities, and so on, including in Kiev. Then the second option is to raise the cost for their sponsors indirectly. So not by directly striking NATO territory, but using cyber operations and economic pressure, diplomatic pressure, and so forth to raise the costs accordingly. And then the option three is to create a negotiating leverage, which means that they must continue to improve their position before negotiations can continue and be concluded. And this means territorial control and continuing to make financial support unpopular to the public of the countries involved.
I don't want to go too deep into it, Joan, because we still have a couple of other stories to get through. But
no problem.
Do you think that Ukraine is watching what has happened with the US and Iran and thinking, how have we not gotten to that point yet of ending the war?
Yes, of course they are, but it's two completely different wars and completely different strategies from Iran on the one side and Russia on the other side. So Russia has used more a war of attrition. So they're trying to basically tire Ukraine out psychologically and regarding their resources as well. But Zelensky he is definitely watching the war and watching the reactions and the almost tiredness of the West to continue being involved in these wars. And that is why he was at the G7 as well and quite forcefully trying to arrange one-on-one meetings, including with President Trump.
Let's head to Southeast Asia, Thailand. It's dusting off a decades-old dream, almost $30 billion US. This is to carve a land bridge between two seas and loosen the grip on the Malacca Strait. And it's one of the busiest shipping lanes on earth. I guess this conversation has been made a lot more relevant by the developments of the war and the Strait of Hormuz.
Oh, absolutely. So this is not simply an infrastructure project. So it's an attempt to reshape one of the world's, as you said, most important trade routes, which, by the way, it carries 25 to 30% of all uh, global seaborne trade, including 45% of seaborne oil or hydrocarbons in general. So, as you said, cargo would be then transported across Thailand by rail, so cutting out the Malacca Strait part, going around the tip at the bottom where Singapore and Malaysia meet, by rail and road rather than passing through the strait. It means they've got to upgrade about a highway that's about the length of the Comrades Marathon, about 90 kilometers. Um, so at this stage, they are actively courting investment from countries like China, the Gulf states, particularly the UAE and Saudi Arabia, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and other companies, logistics companies, port operators, and so on.
Yeah,
But we need to
go ahead.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to add that China is one of the biggest potential beneficiaries. So all their trade goes through the Strait of Malacca, which joins the Indian Ocean with the South China Sea. And they do view the strait as a vulnerability.
Joan, the question of migration is far beyond just an issue South Africa is dealing with. We're now seeing the U.S. shopping around for countries to receive its deported migrants. Jamaica is now reportedly on that list. And I mean, is there a global pattern here? Number one, around how countries are treating the migration problem. But secondly, when you're deporting nationals to a country that have no ties to it, does that not create another problem?
Yes, of course it does. And don't you find this just amazing? I mean, for a country they had a very poor migration policy or execution thereof um, in the last, let's say, 8 years or so, especially in the Biden years. So migration is increasingly becoming a foreign policy and sovereignty issue rather than only a humanitarian one. So Jamaica and other countries, they would have a reasonable concern asking, are we importing responsibilities without receiving the benefits, corresponding benefits thereof? Who are these individuals? And we must note that these are individuals that cannot be deported back to their original countries. So that presumes a problem there as well. And therefore you inherit the consequences of decisions then made elsewhere. So from Jamaica's perspective, it's not simply an immigration issue. For them, it's a question of sovereignty, whether they do have the capacity to handle this and their national interest, because there's regularly a huge pushback against things like these.
Dr. Joan Swart, we're going to have to leave it there. So, I mean, from, deported migrants to criminals high risk, the U.S. doesn't want any of them on their soil. Surely that should also be leading to a broader conversation globally. That's where we'll leave it with the Global Brief. And I'll take just your reflections on some of these stories.